To start this project, I designed a rough model using Fusion 360. I wanted to make sure the proportions and the curves of the leg flowed well. To start the build process, I start by working on the case for the drawers. This case is going to be made out of walnut and dovetailed for the joinery. I rip it to width and then cross cut it to length. The first step in the dovetails is the layout. You can see here I'm using a marking gauge to get the width of the material and then laying that out on the material. Next, I use a combination square to mark out the half pins and then dividers to get equal spacing for the tails. Once I have that, I use a saddle square to mark my layout lines that I'm going to cut to. Next, I use the dovetail saw to cut to the lines, and then I use a coping saw to remove the waste. This completes the tail board of the dovetail. Now I'm able to transfer the tails to the pins and start cutting those out. I use a marking knife to transfer the tails to the pin boards. Then again, I'm going to use a dovetail saw and a fret saw to remove the waste to create the pin board. I use some black tinted epoxy to fill a large knot in the underside of the drawer case. With the drawer case glued up, it's now time for the legs. I pay particular attention to the grain. I'm looking for vertical grain on both the faces and on the sides to accentuate the curve of the leg. I do this by ripping out the pieces that I particularly want. Next, I make a template for the legs using 1/4 inch MDF. I accomplish this by tracing a curve out and then cutting it out with a jigsaw. I then transfer that line to the legs and use the jigsaw again to cut the curve out. Once the curve is roughed out, I use double-sided tape to attach the template to the legs, and then I'm going to take it to the router table. At the router table, I'm going to use an upcut spiral bit to do the flush trimming on the legs. Here I'm setting up my router to cut a rabbet in the back of the drawer case. This is going to allow me to inset a back plywood panel to make the drawer case just a little bit more seamless. For the back panel, I'm using a 1/4 inch walnut plywood to match the walnut drawer case. Here I'm using 2 pieces of scrap to get the perfect internal diameter of the drawer case. I then take those 2 pieces of scrap over to the table saw and line it up and get a perfect fit for that back panel. To attach the legs to the drawer case, I'm going to use the domino joiner. For this method, it's all about layout to make sure that all the legs line up perfectly so one leg isn't off and the table rocks. For the dominoes, I used 4 8x40 dominoes in each leg. While I was slightly concerned about wood movement, after looking at the grain, it's all going in the same directions, so I shouldn't have a major concern with wood movement. To make layout easier on the legs, I used the domino trim stop to make sure each domino was centered in the legs. Before glue up, I did a pre-finish on the outside. I used a Rubio Pure 2C. This is my go-to finish. I really love this stuff. It really brings the walnut to life. Now this glue up was pretty stressful, so here's just a few clips towards the end of me making it look easy. I used the cutoffs of the legs to act as the angles to allow the Bessie parallel clamps to clamp effectively. Now to the top. I used the track saw to cut the top to the final dimension, and then adding more Rubio to really bring that cherry to life. I just can't say enough good things about Rubio. To attach this top, I'm going to use figure 8 bolts. This is what I typically use to attach my tops to the bases. With the table assembled, it's now time for the drawers. Here I am branding one of the sides of the drawers. I'm going to show you a quick few tips of how I prepare the drawers for the Blum undermount slides. Here I'm cutting the notches in the back. I just use a handsaw and a chisel to remove the waste. Next, I use the rockler jig to make sure that the hole is precisely in the right location so the slides line up, and then pre-drilling the holes for the front latches. The front latches are secured with 4 screws. Once I have the front latches and the drawer slides in place, I'm going to fit the drawer box to the opening. To make sure the drawer front has a nice reveal all the way around, I shim it out with some playing cards. Then I take 2 screws, go in through the drawer hardware holes, and attach the drawer front. Then I screw the drawer front to the drawer box with screws from the back. I then remove the 2 screws from the front side, and I drill those holes out through the drawer front and install the drawer pull. Now it's time for final fitting of the drawer. These Blum slides have a lot of adjustment, and the final step is to check to make sure that soft close works. Thank you for watching this build process. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.